Mona, wait. Stop.
This is love. When someone drags you from the wreckage when you have given in, ready to just lie there and die.
I told you not to come here. It's my job to clear up this mess, and you're a part of it. Throw away your guns.
This is love. When someone, no matter what the cost, shows you there is hope, a choice, that you can put down your gun.
See? I can't do it. You're a bastard, Max.
This is love. Love hurts.
Max Payne was a phenomenal success. As well as being a huge commercial success, it went on to win Best Video Game BAFTA, and more importantly, made a powerful statement about the medium in general. While at its core, Max is a stylish run-and-gun shooter, the storytelling in it was more mature and far darker than many other games that came out around the same time. This wasn't a story of demons on Mars, or a protagonist full of cheesy one-liners. This was an exploration of a truly lost and broken man. So when it became time to take that further, Sam Lake decided that he wanted to head into territory that wasn't exactly new for games, but certainly something that only a brave few had dared handle in a mature way. He wanted to tell a love story. Now, when done correctly, a romance can become an important part of a character's development and really add something of value to a story. Unfortunately, however, romance is more often than not handled very badly, with formulaic plots, unbelievable characters, or simply feeling like it was just added to tick a checkbox. In my personal taste though, I should also add that I feel that almost any romance that ends in happy ever after leaves an overall very minor lasting impact on me, if any at all. For me, it's the tragedies that I really remember. No, not this garbage about horny teenagers and bad parents. Or this crap. And the worst tragedy here is that someone actually made it. I'm talking about something really heartbreaking. So it's no surprise that given the nature of Max Payne's gritty noir detective tone and the utter tragedy that is his life, that we know even from the opening panel that this romance is destined to fail in the worst possible way. How could Max, our dauntless yet damaged hero, prevail against such agony? That's what we're here to find out. This is the fall of Max Payne. In general, the story of a sequel is required to raise the stakes, bringing all the things we loved about the original but taking it to a bigger and better level. So, one alien, many aliens. Demons on Mars, demons on Earth. Aliens in a secret lab, aliens all over the world, etc. In the original Max Payne, our hard-boiled hero guns down more than half of New York's criminal underworld, before discovering he's embroiled in a conspiracy that reaches all the way up to the higher levels of power, with government officials and billion-dollar private corporations pulling the strings from behind the curtain of shadows. Certainly, all these things are back in the sequel, but with V no longer a threat, and the once powerful Punchinello crime family now a shadow of its former self, these powerful entities are no longer the source of the real drama. Instead, it's our hero Max who is the true focal point of the story. And while his bloody quest for revenge was the driving force behind the events of the previous game, we are taking a much more introspective look at his personal trauma, and asking questions like, what does it truly mean to survive so much death and murder, and walk away not only free of judgment, but crowned as a hero? And can a man so utterly broken and empty ever forgive himself? Could he ever love again? We open on an expensive-looking house, while hearing the sounds of approaching police sirens and seeing what seems to be the aftermath of an epic gun battle, and the narration begins just as it did the first time.
They were all dead. Love kills.
we see Max broken and holding onto the body of Mona Sachs, and as the police move in to make their arrest, we are sent back in time to the previous night to find Max being brought into a hospital ER almost at death's door. The hard-boiled detective comes to find himself in a half-waking dream as the powerful drugs keeping him alive begin to affect the world around him. While Max isn't exactly one to listen to doctors' orders or reason in general, he seems especially desperate to get out of this and get moving. And as we begin our exploration of the hospital, we get a clear idea of what's got him so possessed. It seems very highly organized professional mercenaries are now in the business of ending Max's life, and don't care who they catch in the crossfire while doing it. This all comes to a climax when Max gets downstairs and encounters a dead body that seems to have a lot of memories attached to it. And just like that, we tumble all the way back to the beginning and see how this tale of agony unfolded. In the aftermath of the V conspiracy, Max is not only pardoned of all charges thanks to the considerable influence of Senator Alfred Woden, but is also elevated to the station of hero, as the one cop who stood against an entire crime family. Max finally returns to his old job working for the New York City police, but without his bloody revenge to fixate on, he finally has to deal with the pain that he's been trying to outrun since the night of his wife's murder. And so, one rainy night, Max responds to a gunshot call at a warehouse, whose owner he may be a little familiar with, and while everything seems alright at first, we quickly discover that the cleaners operating within this place are actually in a different kind of cleaning business altogether, though for Max, this is business as usual. Things get much more complicated, however, when...
Mona?
Max, we gotta stop meeting like this.
Mona Sachs, we discover, survived her gunshot to the head and is more than a little busy herself. And just like that...
If you think nothing can get to you, you're lying to yourself. At best, you're temporarily dead. A lightning bolt can reanimate you without a warning.
The bust goes bad, and just before Max's almost suicidal tendencies get him transformed into roadkill, he is pulled from the jaws of death as his backup finally arrives, and we are introduced to his partner, Detective Winterson. Ah, crap.
I tried to run.
And so with the pieces laid out on the table and a healthy dose of foreshadowing to get things moving, we can really get into this tale of conspiracy and crime. But as I've mentioned before, this isn't exactly the focal point of the story. If anything, the stakes of this story are much lower than the original games, at least as far as events go. You see, there are two basic kinds of narrative. Plot-driven narratives, where our primary focus is on the events that are taking place, and character-driven narratives, which have a heavier focus on dealing with who our protagonists are, and the personal drama that's taking place inside them. There's plenty of crossover, of course, but the original game is clearly a plot-driven story, with events propelling Max through his revenge-driven vendetta, while this is definitely a character-driven story, where the focus is more on Max's personal development and the relationship he develops with Mona. In the first game, Mona Sachs is barely a character at all. Rather, she's simply a plot device to help move Max forward and give him some new information about his situation. Appearing for the first time after Max has taken out the crazed Jack Lupino, she's the one who basically tips him off that the orders for his setup came from much higher up the chain of command. And while their interactions are somewhat flirtatious, this seems to be largely a manipulation on her part, as she quickly slips him a hard hit of V, worried that Max would do something that could put her sister in danger. Mona was also originally supposed to die at the end of the first game, another casualty of Max's raid on the Acer Corp tower, but was left alive at the last minute because the comic artist couldn't bring himself to actually finish the picture of her death. Now, it does make sense that Max might feel some inherent connection with her when meeting her again. Given the nature of his story in the first game, and the fact that he only got away with it unpunished because of the influence of a very powerful senator, he probably doesn't have anyone to talk to about what really happened. Vlad is still around, of course, but a New York detective can hardly make good friends with a Russian mafia boss. So there's a certain sense in such a broken creature like Max fixating on her, as she's the only person with any kind of shared experience surrounding the V-case, something we get an idea of later in the game.
Hi, this is Mona. What's your name?
I just need someone to talk to.
Mona this time is a fully fleshed out character, with motivations and baggage of her own. On the run from people who want to kill her, as well as working for Alfred Woden, it seems she too isn't exactly fully over the events that led to her sister's death and a bullet being lodged in her cranium. If nothing else, the place she uses as a hideout might give some of that away. We'll talk a little more about this later. And after surviving a few close scrapes together, it's quite clear that Mona is in her own way just as drawn to Max as he to her. The reveal of Vlad as the villain also serves a purpose. Rather than being a conspiracy involving corruption at the highest levels of power, this really is just the story of a mob war. But having Vlad turn out to be the true villain removes the need to clutter up the story with the introduction of a new boss man. Sure, we learn more about who Vlad is, and get an idea of his Machiavellian prowess and his ability to manipulate people, but we've got enough of a handle on this guy that we don't have to spend any extra time getting to know him. He inserts himself perfectly into the story, which gives us more time to focus on what really matters here, the relationship between Mona and Max. At the heart of what's going on here is Max's redemption arc, finally pulling himself out of the depths of the pit he fell into all those years ago, facing up to his trauma and putting it behind him for good. Of course, all this happens amidst many epic gun battles, as Max and Mona take the fight to the cleaners and unravel the mystery behind them and their motives. Mona is likewise an incredible character unto herself. Given her manipulation of Max in the previous game, it's easy to be skeptical about her intentions when she first walks through Max's door to warn him about a contract on both their heads. But as their relationship grows, they developed real trust, leading to Max actually shooting Detective Winterson in order to protect her, and Mona entering a burning building to drag the hard-boiled detective from the jaws of death itself. All of this climaxes with... And with that comes the clarity Max needs to power forward and face off against Vladimir Lem.
One last thing left to do. I was compelled to give Vlad his gun back. One bullet at a time.
And bring us all back around to the beginning. Max Payne 2 had a significantly shorter development time and a significantly larger budget than the previous game. Having struck a deal with Rockstar Games, Remedy were able to effectively finish what they started with the first game. Unfortunately, part of this deal meant selling ownership of the intellectual property to Rockstar Games, meaning that Max Payne 2 would also be the last time they would ever make a game about their iconic hero. And while that is a shame, I feel that creative minds like Sam Lake's are better suited to playing with new ideas than simply churning out more of the same thing. Sure, there's probably a parallel universe out there where Remedy have made more Max Payne games than Ubisoft have Assassin's Creed titles. But if the trade-off of this is never getting an Alan Wake game, well, I feel without Alan, the universe would be a much darker place. But I'm getting ahead of myself. With the fall of Max Payne being a direct sequel to Max, the expectation was clear. More of the first game, but better. Since the primary gameplay loop of high-octane third-person mayhem powered by stylish bullet time mechanics was well established, and the game engine was already made, it was more about improving on what was there than trying to reinvent the wheel, which was a major development issue they had with Alan Wake. No, not yet. Control yourself, man. Without a doubt, the biggest addition to the game was the inclusion of the Havoc physics engine, which not only allowed for real-time physics with various items of scenery, but also brought with it ragdoll effects for dead bodies. So, rather than going through a pre-made death animation like in the first game, enemies, once killed, are at the mercy of the physics engine and the stream of high-velocity lead being launched at them, something the devs put to expert use on more than one occasion. But honestly, a physics engine is doing its best job when you barely notice it's there at all. Sure, in games like Half-Life 2 where you have an actual gravity gun, it's an integral feature of the loop. but more often than not, it's just something uninvasive in the background that works to create realism and immersion in the gaming world. And speaking of realism, let's talk about this game's visuals and the significant bump the graphics got. Released in 2003 alongside titles like Beyond Good and Evil and Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, don't get sidetracked, the fall of Max Payne really upgraded its visuals from the original. I always felt like the graphics for Max Payne 1 were a kind of PS 1.5 level threat. Starting development in 1996, the visuals certainly weren't great for their time, but this now feels aesthetically like a true PS2 era game. That being said, many of the series' trademarks are still there, and really places this in the same world as the original. Sam Lake, however, was going to be far too busy this time to double as the lead writer and face and body model for the hero. Back during the first game's development, Remedy was little more than a new startup, building something on a shoestring budget. But now things were serious. Rockstar wasn't likely to tolerate a 5 to 6 year development cycle for the sequel, and since the studio now had the money for it, they could bring in real actors. The role of Max was taken by Timothy Gibbs, while the face and body of Mona Sachs fell to Kathy Tong. The voice, of course, couldn't change. James McCaffrey's powerful larynx had left a stamp on this character just as powerful as Peter Cullen had on Optimus Prime.
One shall stand, one shall fall. Why throw away your life so recklessly? That's a question you should ask yourself, Megatron.
And James is back in full force.
Einstein was right. Time is relative to the observer. When you're looking down the barrel of a gun, time slows down. Your whole life flashes by, heartbreak and scars. Stay with it, and you can live a lifetime in that split second.
The comics are back, of course, though there is now an increased number of in-game cutscenes, no doubt brought on by engine improvements, and the fact the characters' mouths could actually be animated this time.
You've switched tactics. We need to talk.
So it should come as a surprise to absolutely no one that Max Payne's trademark bullet time is back. Having found its way into several other games at this point, and with a view to get worked into a lot more under various different names, the feature was an absolute hit, and was what really separated this game from the pack. Some small adjustments have been made though, with the default controls now binding activate bullet time to the right click, and shoot dodge being bound to another key. Something I, as someone who's definitely clocked up more time on the OG game than this, had to change at the first opportunity. In the first game though, Max's dodges seem more like stylish falls than jumps. Now, Max launches himself into the air much harder and gets a lot more airtime regardless of the direction he's facing. This really helps with those bullet time shoot dodges, as it's much easier to fire more shots. I never felt like I could fire the shotgun more than once per shoot dodge in the first game, and just generally looks cool as you gun guys down and see them ragdoll across to the other side of the room. The combat, of course, is as great as it always was. Tighter controls make straightforward run and gun gameplay without the bullet time much more viable than before, and the environments are open enough to accommodate Max's somewhat suicidal and unique gun kata style. One addition I really appreciate in this game is how grenades have their own button, removing the need to cycle through my weapons to select and use them. Honestly, had this feature been in the first game, I'd have probably used them a lot more. This is easily one of the things that Halo brought to the action game that I'm actually okay with, but you can keep your limited inventory and rechargeable health. On the subject of grenades, I'm also relieved that there are far fewer cheap grenade attacks coming my way too. Max Payne's levels were full of really frustrating cheap shots, such as opening a door only to immediately hear a grenade fall at your feet and have a matter of seconds to get away, with the explosion scumming most of your health if you were lucky enough to survive. And while there certainly are a few of these in the sequel, their presence has been reduced overall. Possibly one of the best new features in this game though, is how in certain missions we take control of both Max and Mona, and get a chance to see the story from both their perspectives. Mona handles pretty much exactly like Max, and comes equipped with the Dragunov, which Wikipedia tells me is an FPK PSL semi-automatic sniper rifle with a 10-round magazine. And I absolutely know what all of that means 100%, I promise you. We mainly control her while they explore a construction site that also doubles as the base of operations for the cleaners, and we get into some great shootouts with her, leading to a section where she's actually covering Max with her sniper rifle while he crosses dangerous open terrain and the enemies close in from all angles around him. I will say that when I first realized where this was going, I found myself groaning, as these types of missions have been done really badly more often than not. Often, you're trying to manage enemies coming at you from entirely different parts of the environment, wearing clothes that make them indistinguishable from the scenery, and just when you think you've got a handle on it, someone you couldn't possibly have known was there comes and shoots you in the back while you're staring down your scope. Yes, I'm looking at you, Resident Evil 4. You may have brought many innovations to the PS2 era action game, but you're also guilty of every crime of that era too, up to and including cheap shot QTEs that kill you. I gotta stop getting sidetracked. But Remedy managed to execute these sections in style, and managed to make them really fun moments, putting just the right amount of pressure on you to perform, while giving you a chance to see Max do his thing from afar. Though, I'm not sure I'd enjoy these sequences half as much with a pad versus a keyboard and mouse. I am also excited to say that while the surreal dream sequences from the previous game are back, and even more bizarre than before, the awful blood trail sections have thankfully been removed, though there is some really awkward platforming in this game still. The world and setting of Max Payne 2 is once again a gritty and dark film noir vision of New York. Our story is loaded with melodrama, and Max's prose are once again elaborate and poetic. As with the previous game, however, the straight-faced melodrama is once again broken up with an appropriate amount of comedy. And I have to stress the word appropriate here. Disney, please pay attention, because you've been getting this wrong since Thor: The Dark World. You don't want your most dramatic scenes broken up by cheap laughs. There are times where you absolutely have to own the melodrama and squeeze it for all it's worth. Mona's final moments wouldn't have benefited from a fart joke at all, and because of how well it was executed, it's a truly emotional and powerful moment that was foreshadowed perfectly from the start. But just because we're in a story about a grim-faced film noir detective, doesn't mean we can't have a little fun with it. From cliches like Jim Rivera's hard-ass police chief character, and the dark absurdity of Mona's hideaway inside the twisted abandoned funhouse, to the 3 Italian hard men who help out when you're tasked with rescuing Vinny from the Russian mob, and, well, this. Oh, poor Vinny. He died as he lived. A joke. Humor is a powerful tool. It can lighten a mood or just make characters seem more real and endearing, and it's used to its maximum effect in all of Sam Lake's writing. I mean, just wait until we talk about Mr. Scratch. Not yet. The tone is basically perfect, and keeps the game well-paced and engaging. It connects you with the characters on an emotional level, and brings it all to a climax that is just heartbreaking. You see that right there? That's not how you do a joke. One of the smaller features I wanted to talk about was the TV shows that can be watched throughout the game. Remedy dipped their toes in the water of this with Lords and Ladies in the first game.
My lord, you should not speak so.
But my lady, I must.
My lord, no! I forbid you, this cannot be, this must not be!
And going back to the comedy, these do definitely tie into that. They took it much further in Alan Wake with the creation of Night Springs, but their first big step was here with Address Unknown. The events of Max Payne 2 take place over a matter of days, and at this time, there's a special TV marathon of a now cancelled cult TV hit called Address Unknown. This is a brilliant little piece of world building, as we catch cops and people in their homes enjoying the show without a care or a thought for what Max is going through. The story is very inspired by Twin Peaks, much like another popular Remedy game, Stop It. The gist of the story involves a man named John, who may or may not have killed his girlfriend, and might be undergoing severe psychological trauma, or may not have been pulled into another dark version of New York by an evil doppelganger who is framing him for his crimes. Honestly, I love this premise, and I'd watch the crap out of this show. provided they didn't pull a Lost or a Game of Thrones, and get so desperate to subvert the expectations that the finale is completely disappointing. We also get a deeper look at the show as we explore the bizarre funhouse attraction that Mona is using as her base of operations, and it's equal parts hilarious and utterly terrifying. And you wouldn't be hard pushed to see a kind of similarity between John's trauma and Max's, especially given that one-time face model for Max Payne, Sam Lake, is the protagonist of this show. This and the other shows that pop up are all worth stopping to take in once you've cleaned out a room full of goons, and honestly, it doesn't kill the pacing at all. They're all really fun and fit the setting and the story so well. So for the first time in what I hope is a long YouTube adventure, I found myself reviewing a direct sequel to a game from the same console generation as its predecessor. And I will say, it's been very difficult to find things to say beyond, it's the first game but better. But honestly, could we really have asked for more? While I've reviewed games like Resident Evil and Deus Ex that have crossed generations and played with their genres to great effect, very often the only thing a great sequel has to do is improve on what was there in the original. And it's kind of sad just how many sequels come up short in that regard. But not this one. This was the work of a clear creative vision. From the story to the gameplay and the aesthetic design, everything is there, but better. The team that put this together no doubt worked their arses off to ship it by the deadline, and they were rewarded with a game that was a massive critical success and objectively better than one of the best action games ever made. Objectively. So, you may remember my Human Revolution review. How at the end I talked about that hidden X factor in game enjoyment. How it's you. Well, my nostalgia for the first game is still much stronger than it is for this one, but it's an incredibly tight race for sure. Either way, this is a beautiful story and a wonderful experience for players. Maybe you're a Max Payne 3 fan here curious about where it all started, and maybe the original just looks a little too dated for you. Well, go ahead and give this one a try then. I promise you will absolutely not regret it. This is the apex Max Payne experience, the heart of what Remedy were trying to make with the first game, but distilled into its purest form. A dark and gritty film noir story with a broken hero on a path to redemption, a femme fatale love interest, and a ballet performed with bullets. The police come and clean up the mess. Winterson's treachery is exposed. Vladimir Lem is defeated, and Max is once again vindicated. But more so, his experience with Mona led to him finally putting the pain of his family's loss behind him.
I had a dream of my wife. She was dead, but it was all right.
So, what could be next for our hero? Well, that's where things get interesting. As I mentioned before, Remedy sold the rights to Rockstar, and with the book closed on Max Payne's drama decided to move on to something else. Alan Wake released in 2010, 7 years after the release of Max Payne 2, and is going to be the subject of the next video in this Remedy Games series. However, before we can go there, we're going to have to get sidetracked. For you see, in 2012, almost a decade after Max Payne 2 was released, Rockstar did in fact release a new Max Payne game. They worked very closely with Remedy on a lot of the storytelling aspects, but with it being a 7th generation console game, the action game as a whole had changed a lot. And while there were lots of long-term fans hungry for more Max, Rockstar was also looking to hook a lot of new fans in the process. So it seems, for one last time, we're going to be taking a dive into the mind of a broken man, and a world run by criminals and corrupt officials. Only this time, it isn't New York. It's somewhere far more colourful. We're going to be heading to Sao Paulo in Brazil, where all kinds of scum will be trying it on with a nobody from America, only to discover that that fucking nobody is Max Payne.
Time moves forward, and nothing changes.